The College Football Treatment.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the College Football Treatment. Today we're joined by Dr Gabriel, a psychologist at UCF, and hopefully he can give us a bit of a different insight in comparison to the previous two episodes, something a bit different, something we've not heard before.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to give us a bit of a, like you said, an insight on the different side of things as he's working hands-on with the players each day, dealing with obviously like their mental health and obviously the fact that they're balancing a degree alongside a elite sport. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what he says. Let's get into it.
The College Football Treatment.
So we're joined by Dr Gabriel now. We're going to start off, obviously, because you're a student athlete yourself, but in soccer, not football. So how has that helped you in your sort of day-to-day work in helping student athletes with their mental health?
Being a prior athlete gives me a unique insight into the day-to-day of what a student athlete goes to. I feel that yes, you can talk about it, but if you haven't lived it, it's a very different experience. Knowing the different challenges, the pressures that you face, having that expectation that you have to perform. If you don't perform, you're not going to be able to play, while also managing time with your friends, academics, family, different obligations, your health as well. So I feel that today's student athlete has it much tougher than what I had it, because I could get a break from different things, because when I was playing, social media was not as prevalent as it is right now, and it was not intertwined into our daily lives as it is right now. So if I wanted to disconnect and take a break from school, from my performances, all I had to do was just shut my phone down, and that was it. Today's student athlete is very different, and having those experiences to me gives me credibility with them because they know that I played. And with athletes, that is very important. This is a very tight-knit group that if you're not part of that community, it's very different to get in if you don't have big credentials or you're not, like, in a way someone that's extremely well known or popular. So being a student athlete is invaluable to me.
I mean, you sort of touched on it there, but how severe is the pressure of balancing playing in front of thousands of people on one day and then suddenly coming back down to earth and having to do a degree? How severe is that balance?
In terms of my work or for student athletes?
For the student athletes.
It is like they are there for a reason. And at times I sort of switch between the player in me and the psychologist in me. So I understand when I am talking to a coach, I am talking to someone in administration, when the pressures that they feel and I feel, okay, we need to get this player to be playing. And for whatever the reason, they're not being able to perform. The same pressure the student athlete faces because they want to perform. But it's something that specifically with mental health, they can't see it, but they feel it, which is different if they have an ankle injury, a shoulder injury, even a concussion. They know where it came from. For example, with anxiety, depression, a relationship breakup, like the pressures of academics, practices. Those things are invisible, which at times is harder for them to grasp and understand how it's impacting their daily lives, their behaviors, how their body's feeling, their sleep, their appetite, concentration, execution. So at times it's difficult for them to pinpoint, oh, it's coming from this.
I mean, obviously there's a stigma around men's mental health, and it's something that's kind of improving over the past couple of years. Do you feel as though student athletes are quite reluctant to ask for advice on that sort of topic?
I think stigma is prevalent. Yes, I feel that it's still there at the same intensity. It's just that now people talk about it a bit more. If you guys saw Ted Lasso, like the last episode where he talks about his anxiety, the reaction around everyone, it is exactly how it happens. It is not exaggerated. That is exactly how it is. If someone cries in their retirement, they're applauded. They're saying, oh, he's being vulnerable. Oh, look at the emotion that he's showing. But if they cry because they missed a shot, all of a sudden they're weak. And they're called names. And sportscaster, news, fans, they look at, oh, he's being weak. Oh, he's not mentally tough enough. Well, if you look at it, how much training do athletes get mentally in comparison to the amount of time, energy, money that's invested in their physical? Like, I am one in the university that I work with at the University of Central Florida. I'm one person for 900 some athletes, or like 600 to 900, something like that. We have a staff of about 12 to 13 athletic trainers, which focus on their physical. Yeah. And not to mention all of the money that's been invested in weight rooms, in nutrition, and the gear that they have so that they're able to perform. Yet mentally, they're just one person. Yeah. And the same goes with other universities. Like, it's very rare that you'll get in a university setting 2 or more sports psychologists specifically to work with the student athletes. It is very rare. So to me, the disparity, it is incredible. And the expectation is that they're going to be able to know how to manage their emotions. And we're talking about kids, not professionals, kids. 18 to 23, 24. These are kids. And they're expected to know how to manage pressure, how to manage anxiety, how to manage depression, disappointment, when it is not a horizontal relationship. There is a differential in power. Like, if I'm a professional, well, I have some sway in telling the coach, like, you know what, like, we don't want to do this. And we've seen it in professional sports, specifically in football. Your version and my version of football, that if the team doesn't want to play, the coach is gone. Because it's very easy to get rid of one person versus a squad of 25. But you can do that when you have power, when I'm being paid a salary, which is very different if you are on scholarship. Because I give you a scholarship, but if you don't perform, I can take it back. Yeah. Or I won't play you. So, like, those dynamics are very important, and they really impact the mental health of a student athlete.
Yeah. So do you think there are any like hidden tendencies during games and practices that kind of show that a player could be feeling pressure or feeling mental issues or anything like that?
I feel that it's a cultural thing, meaning the environment that you are in. If I am giving a student athlete messages that it's okay if you're feeling anxiety. Now, listen, if you need to take a mental health day, it's perfectly fine. Like, if you need to take a break mentally, that's okay. Like, just let me know and we'll be fine. But what student athletes hear at times is, well, you're not allowed to take a mental health break. Well, you need to be mentally tough enough. Well, you need to push through. You need to be resilient. You need to be tough. We want people who are tough here, who are able to withstand and tolerate pressure. Well, physically, they know when not to push an athlete. Because if my ankle is hurting, well, it's going to swell up. And you can see that physically. Now, emotionally, it's the exact same thing. Like, to me, I don't see a difference between mental health and physical health. Because at the end of the day, if either of these is not in their optimal state, you're not going to be able to perform.
Yeah.
Which to me is the exact same thing, because a coach is there to win. If they don't win, they're out, whether it's college or professional. So it is in their best interest that their players are in an optimal state. And so by you telling a player, you need to be tough enough, like they make a mistake in concentration. It's like you're being weak right now. What do you think? And also there's a culture around your teammates, like, which is a reality. In sports, you are not in a way allowed to show vulnerability, to show weakness, because people prey on that weakness. So if you scream at me and I shut down, oh, look, he's weak. Like we can bully him. Like we can say whatever we want to him and he's just gonna crumble. No. Don't talk. No. You can't be in a pressure situation because you can't handle the pressure. So we'll take you out.
Do you think that kind of thing goes? Sorry, Charlie. Do you think that kind of thing goes under the radar at colleges? Because I mean, at the professional level this year, we've seen it with Calvin Ridley, who he had to cut his season short because he was going through mental difficulties. So his season was cut short, and now teams might be reluctant to kind of pick him up in free agency because of what he's been through, that's ridiculous in itself. But do you think that at the college level, that kind of thing gets brushed under the carpet just so that it doesn't affect their chances at the next level?
It does, but just like depending on the sport that you are in, people communicate. Like coaches communicate. Like there's like someone who knows someone who knows someone. Like in the athletic training departments, like so. Even though in the States it's big and there are a ton of universities, you're gonna be able to get all the information that you need from a player. Like that person saw the mental health professional, or he was working with the sports psychologist. For some reason, that raises a red flag for a coach. Yeah. Like you mentioned, like if someone has a knee injury, like an ACL tear, they're going to be out for 8 months.
Yeah.
But they don't put a question mark on the recovery of that player. It's just, okay, like he's gone for this season, but we're going to have him next season and everything's going to be fine. But for some reason, if it's mental health, which it's treatable, just like a knee injury, if you get the proper treatment, it's not going to affect you. All of a sudden, oh no, we can't. We need to be extra careful with this player because he spoke that he has anxiety, or he spoke that he has depression. So yes, I do feel that there is a stigma, and that stigma carries. The same thing with basketball player Kevin Love. Like to get to the NBA, to be a professional, you are the elite of the elite. And you have people criticizing his toughness. Someone who's been to the Olympics, who's won championships, who's been an all-star. And you have even players in the NBA, oh, he's not tough enough. DeMar DeRozan, as well, has spoken about his mental health. He's weak. Really? You're going to tell me that player is weak when he can drop 50 on you and win the game at any moment, and you're sitting on the bench, or you play JV basketball, or you are a commentator who's never played a day in your life, and now you're commenting on their mental health. Same thing with Simone Biles. She is the pinnacle of excellence in gymnastics. Yet she said that mentally she wasn't ready to perform in a sport where if your concentration is off, it's not that you might get an injury. It's that your life may be in danger, if not 100% there, because of the complexity of the moves that she's able to execute. And yet you heard a ton of commentators, oh, she's weak. She's not mentally tough enough. Oh, she's taking the easy way out. In my head, I was like, oh, I just wish you could do one day of the things that she does. And you tell me if you're able to perform.
Yeah. So this is a question sort of focusing more on your work rather than the student athlete side of it. So if you were to be approached by a student athlete requesting help with their mental health, what are the most effective methods and the most proven methods that you would undertake to help them?
The answer will depend on what it is that we are working on. So I do two different types of, like mainly when I'm working individually with the student athlete, there's two different types of services that I do. One is like the traditional psychotherapy, and the other is focused on sports performance. And so like there's no issues with anxiety, depression, everything in their life is going well for them. They're able to manage it, but they want to improve mentally their performance. There's something in their sport that something's not going right. So those are the two different things that I do. Now, depending on what it is that we're working on, we'll either do it in my office or I'll actually go to their sport or their arena or their court pitch, because there are things that if I'm working with performance specifically in my office, I can't recreate. So there are certain automatic things that we all do that in my office, everything's going to make sense to you because the amount of pressure is down. Your insight is going to be up. So if we're talking about how anxiety impacts you, well, in my office, you're going to be able to connect all the dots and say, oh yeah, that makes sense. Here, 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 here. Oh, I'm going to be able to execute it. But then when you get to practice or the game or the match, now it looks different. So I found that if I'm working with performance, at some point, me going and being next to them in practice and really stopping, okay, right now, what it is that you're doing. Like, notice that what we thought at the office, that you're not giving yourself time to mentally reset before you execute the next one. And notice how that increase in energy is affecting your performance. And right there, if I stop them between one repetition and the other, they're able to get it very quickly. Now, if I'm doing more traditional like therapy, like all the interventions that I do, even for example, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, it needs to be adapted to that particular student athlete. Because I can use different analogies, different examples, but they're not going to resonate with you. And if they don't resonate with you, if I don't use language that is appropriate and it resonates with you, then you mentioned at the beginning how me being a previous athlete helped me. This is where it's key, because I know exactly what's going on in the locker room. Like, they don't need to explain it to me. How relationship with teammates, so how relationship with a coach. If you're not playing, if you're playing, they don't need to describe that to me. I want to know what's their experience, but I have my experience and I know what they might be feeling because we're going to share a lot of different experiences. If I didn't have that experience, now you have to explain it to me, because I can see it on the TV. I can look at it, but I'm not going to understand the subtle things between teammates, a look, going like a comment, and how that escalates. Or in practice, if I'm getting hit all the time, how like little burst ups, arguments, fights occur. And then it's like, yeah, we're fine after. And for someone who hasn't been there, well, that's going to look weird. And they might want to focus on that. Well, you just told me that you fought with your teammates. So let's focus on that. Not like we do it every day in practice, but we're roommates. And so depending on what it is that I'm working on, it has to be tailor-made to that particular student.
Okay, that's fantastic. I think that's all the questions we had. So really appreciate your time.
Yeah,
that was really
thank you very much.
insightful. And yeah, have a good rest of your day.
The college football treatment.
So it was another insightful interview there with Dr. Gabriel, the psychologist from UCF. He brought up obviously a couple of very good points in regards to players' mental health and how they kind of deal with that on a day-to-day basis. One point I kind of would like to kind of bring back again was when he mentioned about the fact that players might not get to the next level if there's a known issue with their mental health, which to me was obviously it's completely ridiculous that that's even like a talking point, because that should never be like a point. Like you said, if a player had ruptured their Achilles or something and they were out for a year, they wouldn't kind of just say, "Oh no, we don't want to sign you anymore." It'd just be like a question mark of when they're going to come back. But when it's to do with their mental health, it's like they kind of don't welcome them back.
He picked up on the fact that when you get a physical injury, there's a time on it, and coaches can say, "Oh yeah, we know he'll be back," but there is a really negative sort of stereotype on players that are suffering from mental health issues, and like you said, coaches will just sort of see them as maybe weak and unreliable, but in reality, like you said again, if they can get the correct help from someone like him, it is effectively an injury that can be fixed, can be cured, that can get them back to their normal selves. I think it was a really good like insight from him as to like how normal it is for athletes that play at that level to have mental health issues, and how easy, if given the right treatment, can just bounce back from them.
Well, you mentioned there about physical injuries. Jameson Williams has had a season-ending injury that will keep him out probably until the start of the NFL season, yet he's still projected to go top 15. I'd like to know, in a sort of theoretical sense, if that was considered a mental illness, or he had a mental illness, would he still be considered so high up in people's mock drafts? Would scouts still be looking at him? I'd like to compare the two, because like you say, there is still a stigma on it that there isn't on physical injuries.
I mean, like I mentioned in the episode, the whole Calvin Ridley situation this year in the NFL, obviously his season got cut extremely short because he's going through mental health issues. And it's like, you look at the Cowboys this season, Gallup got injured in the last couple of games. He tore his Achilles or whatever he's done, and they've just signed him to another big contract. So they're obviously not concerned. But whereas Ridley, there's not even any talks of whether he's coming back or not. And Antonio Brown as well. I know he had that whole fiasco at the end of last season where he walked off the pitch and he kind of just quit from the Buccaneers. He's obviously going through something, and I think that that's going to affect him now going into free agency. No one's even going to look at him.
Well, there's been no offers. His name hasn't been brought up in free agency, and we're 4 days in. He's considered he was considered one of the top wide receivers.
Exactly, and it's mental to me that a player that could have broke their leg or something physical that extreme, that they could get picked up again. Whereas if it's a mental issue, it's like we don't want to risk it, which to me is just, I can't get my head around it.
I do think it's sort of the fact that coaches maybe haven't had the correct education on mental health issues, because when you speak to an expert like Dr. Gabriel, because obviously we have zero experience in anything to do with almost professional level sport and mental health issues that athletes have. It's hard to put yourself in their shoes, but I feel like until coaches and even players become educated about it, this is still going to be the same. Mental health issues won't be considered as just injuries that people can get treatment for and recover from. They'll still just be sort of classed as outcasts in professional sport and elite college sport.
Well, it's got to come from training. Sorry, Jamie. I was going to say, because like a lot of people through their younger years, I mean, I know it was the case for me in school, we're given first aid training and how to deal with first aid training for physical injuries, but there's no mental training. I know that.
I feel like it's like a specialist kind of. It's if you're going to go into that sort of training, you need to know what you're on about. Which I know it's the same with physical. Like there's no difference between it. It's just like Dr. Gabriel said. One you can see, one you can't see, and one you can see when it happened, and one you can't see when it happened. And obviously there's a comparison between the two, but obviously one's harder to spot than the other, or that sort of thing. But it's like he said in the episode as well, where like coaches are kind of just like, no, you need to be tough. You can't, like, you need to just work through it and all that sort of thing. They've obviously got no sort of, I don't want to say care for the mental health of their players.
The knowledge just isn't there. They've not been educated enough on it.
Yeah, and maybe it's because they haven't been through it. They don't know what it feels like. But that's just, there should be some sort of understanding there that just because you haven't been through it, you can still understand what it's. Yeah, not what it's like, but how hard it is to work through.
This links to the point I wanted to bring up from the interview, the fact that he said that he is just one psychologist who has to deal with 600 to 900 athletes. And I feel like the sort of ability to become educated and learn about mental health won't be able to progress until there are more psychologists that get to deal with the players firsthand, and even the coaches in some instances. Because if you've got a ratio of 1 to 900 psychologists to players, it's impossible for them to deal with more than one player at once unless they go and receive external help. But something like that, like he said, a mental health issue is just as serious or just as important as a physical issue when it comes to sport. But until because there's probably at these colleges upwards of 20 to 30 physical coaches who deal with injuries and rehabilitation and physiotherapy and stuff like that. But if he's just one psychologist at a college, a very big college as well, UCF isn't just a small college with like 100 student athletes. Like you said, there's almost 1,000 student athletes. He's having to deal with all of them almost himself, and you can't even begin to sort of teach coaches and like accelerate their knowledge if he's dealing with players himself, because they're not even going to get the treatment that they deserve in some cases.
Another thing that he kind of brought up as well, which is obviously it is true. Like, it comes into what you've just said, Charlie. The funding behind like mental health practices is nowhere near as prevalent as physical. Like, think of how much they spend on gyms and gym equipment and physio coaches and sports conditioning coaches and strength and conditioning coaches.
He said he either has to do it on the field if it's a sporting issue, or in his office. But I'm guessing they don't really have the facilities like a gym or like a pool for like hydrotherapy and stuff like that these colleges will have. I feel like you said, funding it's not going to be there until it's brought into normality. That it's just a normal thing that happens to the majority of people, and again, student athletes as well as just regular people.
I think the good thing is that our generation, and obviously our generation is now the college class in sport, the stigma's definitely going. And I think by the time our generation are slightly older and we have a new generation come through and they're the college athletes, hopefully there'll be a lot more understanding, and hopefully there won't be stigma at all. Because I think the stigma's definitely starting to go. Like you said, I think a lot of people touched on Calvin Ridley and were supportive of him. There just needs to be more light shed on it.
Yeah.
That's the thing, especially at the college level as well.
Yeah.
The athletes need to be given the sort of platform to speak up on these things. So I'm sure if at a college a player, I don't know, tears his ACL and then is out for a whole collegiate year, in comparison to someone who has to take a year to fix their mental health, that won't be covered in any media or even really talked about too much in comparison to a physical injury. But
Yeah.
like I say, until they get that sort of exposure and the ability to speak out, and it becomes more prevalent in social media, like Dr. Gabriel spoke on, then it can't move forward until that happens. Like it's just a case of people becoming more aware, and like you say, it's our generation is a lot more like open and willing to accept different issues that people may be having. That, and like he touched on again, like when he was a college athlete, social media wasn't a thing. I know this is what you wanted to touch on, Dan, but social media wasn't a thing, and now it is. It's harder, but at the same time, it's easier because our generation is the one that predominantly uses social media, and we are more accepting.
I think it will be way more accepting in the future. I just wanted to say before we conclude this episode that we have started putting articles out on our website. The link to that will be in the description and for Spotify. I think it's a WordPress link, but you can check it out on our Twitter. We'll have articles about that and about this episode coming regularly. So check that out. And we'll see you next week for another episode.
Mm-hmm.